Are you seriously expecting me to stay here? I heard Emily's voice cutting through the quiet room, her tone sharp and unyielding as if the walls themselves were echoing her command. I froze, clutching the edge of the dining table, the letter in my hand trembling slightly, the heavy weight of grief pressing down on me like a lead blanket. Just 2 days ago my son Daniel had passed away unexpectedly, and in the midst of my sorrow, I had thought the house would hold a sense of sanctuary, a place where memories of laughter and love might cushion the raw pain. Instead, Emily's words made the familiar home feel alien, almost hostile, and a deep ache of betrayal settled into my chest. I had raised Daniel with a heart full of hope and patience, watched him grow from a curious boy into a thoughtful man, and never imagined that in his absence, his wife could wield such cold indifference. I remembered the mornings spent baking cookies together, Daniel chasing the dog across the yard, the quiet evenings where we would talk about dreams, and all those moments seemed like fragile glass now, shattered and lying in 1,000 irreparable pieces. Emily stepped closer, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor, eyes avoiding mine as if she could deny the weight of her own audacity. "Pack your bags, Margaret," she continued, each word precise and cutting. "And maybe it's time you learn to let go of all this dramatic mourning." I blinked back, tears, the sting of humiliation mingling with sorrow, and a strange clarity began to form in my mind. I realized that grief alone would not shield me from the undercurrents swirling around this house, from the subtle manipulations and the quiet disregard that Emily had perfected over months, maybe years. My heart ached not only for the loss of my son, but for the betrayal I had never anticipated. The betrayal by someone I had welcomed into my family with trust. The living room, once filled with Daniel's laughter and warmth, now felt like a stage for Emily's performance, a demonstration of control, and yet in the midst of that storm, a small, resolute part of me began to gather strength. I remembered my own mother, how she had faced hardship with dignity, and I thought about the legacy I wanted to leave. Not just memories of pain, but a testament to patience, resilience, and wisdom. I exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in my shoulders ease slightly, and I knew that my response would need to be measured, deliberate, and unshakable, reflecting the dignity I had carried all my life. Emily might have believed she could push me out, force me into retreat, and assert her dominance in the wake of tragedy, but I could feel a quiet determination blooming inside me, a plan forming with each heartbeat, as I began to consider the ways I could reclaim not just my place in this home, but my voice, my respect, and ultimately, the truth of who I was in this family. The rain outside tapped against the windows in gentle rhythm, a reminder that life, even in sorrow, moves forward, and I allowed myself to meet Emily's gaze, steady and unwavering, the spark of resolve clear in my eyes. This was not the end of my story, nor the final word in our conflict. It was the opening chapter of a battle I intended to navigate with grace, intelligence, and unwavering calm, proving to myself and quietly to the world around me that dignity and strength can survive even the deepest betrayals. The morning after Emily's words, the house felt impossibly quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ears and makes each thought louder than usual. I wandered into the kitchen, noticing the rain still falling in soft sheets against the window, and the smell of coffee brewing reminded me of simpler mornings, when Daniel would come down the stairs humming his favorite song and the world seemed brighter and lighter. I poured myself a cup and held it between my hands, feeling the warmth seep through my fingers, grounding me in the moment, and I thought about how easy it would have been to retreat, to leave this house and let Emily claim her victory, but something in me refused to bend. I remembered all the years of dedication, the way I had nurtured my family, offering support, guidance, and love even when it went unnoticed or unappreciated. Sitting there, I realized that my grief was not a weakness. It was a testament to the depth of my connection to my son and to the family I had built around him. The memories of Daniel were both comforting and sharp, like a bittersweet melody, reminding me why I needed to stand firm. I walked through the living room, noticing small details that Emily had overlooked, the way a photograph tilted slightly on the mantelpiece, the way the sunlight caught the edges of the silver frame, and I began to think strategically. If I was to preserve my place, my voice, and my dignity, I would need allies, information, and patience. I reached for my phone and called my oldest friend, Carol, who had known Daniel since he was a boy, someone who could offer advice without judgment and insight without pressure. Carol listened as I spoke, her voice calm and steady, and she reminded me that grace and composure could be more powerful than confrontation, that showing understanding while quietly asserting boundaries often reveals truths others try to hide. I spent the rest of the morning moving through the house, tidying areas that had been left in disarray, each small act a reaffirmation of control and presence, and I noticed how Emily had arranged the furniture in ways that subtly suggested ownership, almost as if she believed rearranging the space could erase my years of care. I chose to view these gestures as signs of impatience, indicators of insecurity, and I let that perspective shape my approach. When Emily returned from running errands, she found me calmly setting the table for breakfast, a gentle smile on my face, and I could see the momentary flicker of surprise in her eyes, as if my composed presence unsettled her plans. I greeted her politely, offering coffee and conversation, and she responded with clipped sentences, her usual attempts at control failing to fully mask her discomfort. Throughout the morning I maintained a steady rhythm, moving from room to room, preparing meals and tending to small household details, all the while allowing myself to notice the ways Emily attempted to manipulate the atmosphere, the slight changes in tone, the quick adjustments to schedules, and the subtle redirection of conversations. I understood that these were tactics to gauge my reaction, to see whether I would respond with frustration or retreat, but I remained centered, breathing slowly, focusing on each action as deliberate and intentional. By midday, I had established a small sense of order, a pattern that reminded me that my life and my presence in this home were not defined by Emily's attempts to diminish me. I took a moment to sit by the window, watching the rain form tiny rivers down the glass, and I allowed myself to imagine a future in which clarity, patience, and intelligent action would restore balance. I knew the path ahead would require observation, strategy, and composure, yet even in the midst of sorrow, I felt a quiet satisfaction, a certainty that acting with dignity and thoughtful persistence would illuminate the truth, expose hidden agendas, and ultimately secure my rightful place in the family and in the memory of my son Daniel, whose life deserved to be honored by integrity and love, rather than overshadowed by cruelty or manipulation. By late afternoon, the sunlight had softened into a warm, golden glow that spilled across the living room, casting long, gentle shadows over the furniture and photographs that lined the walls. I moved slowly, intentionally, carrying a tray of tea and freshly baked scones from the kitchen to the small sitting area near the window, my movements deliberate and calm, each step a quiet affirmation of presence and resilience. Emily appeared in the doorway, glancing at the tray and then at me, her posture slightly tense, as if she were weighing her next words carefully, testing the boundaries of the day. I offered her a polite nod and a soft, measured smile, acknowledging her presence without conceding any power, and she hesitated for a moment, uncertain how to respond. Sitting down with my tea, I allowed myself a few deep breaths, feeling the warmth of the cup in my hands, and I remembered all the mornings spent in this very spot, Daniel laughing beside me, the aroma of breakfast filling the air, and how those moments had shaped the rhythm of our family life. I decided to speak first, gently, recounting a small memory of Daniel's curiosity as a child, how he had once spent hours observing the patterns of rain on the window, fascinated by the way drops would merge and slide down the glass. My voice was calm, even, and I noticed Emily's expression soften slightly, though her eyes still held a guarded edge. The conversation was careful, measured, each sentence a bridge between the past and the present, a way to honor my son while subtly reminding Emily that I remained a central figure in this household. As the afternoon progressed, I moved through small tasks with purpose, tidying rooms that had become slightly disordered, adjusting cushions, folding blankets, and attending to details that might otherwise seem mundane but carried significance in preserving the home Daniel had cherished. Emily watched, occasionally offering comments or suggestions, but I responded with steady composure, integrating her words where appropriate without allowing them to disrupt the rhythm I had established. I noticed how these small acts, the careful attention to our shared space, seemed to unsettle her, a subtle shift in energy that indicated she recognized my continued role and influence. Later, I took a moment to sit by the window again, watching the sunlight glint off the wet leaves outside, and I allowed myself to reflect on the day, thinking strategically about the days ahead. I considered who might offer support, what details I needed to observe more closely, and how to maintain dignity and calm while asserting boundaries. Each plan I formulated was grounded not in confrontation but in quiet observation, careful attention, and an unwavering commitment to integrity. When evening approached, the house had settled into a gentle quiet, the rain having tapered to a soft drizzle, and I felt a sense of accomplishment in maintaining composure and presence throughout the day. Emily prepared dinner and I offered assistance, moving with purpose and awareness, reinforcing my place in the household not through force but through consistency, reliability, and the quiet authority that comes from years of experience and care. The shared meal passed with polite conversation, moments of tension softened by memory and humor, and I realized that even in the aftermath of loss and the challenges of human behavior, the environment we create, the respect we maintain, and the thoughtfulness we bring to each interaction can shape outcomes and reveal truths. As I cleared the table and prepared for the evening, I felt a deep sense of resolve, knowing that each day, each interaction, each decision contributed to a larger picture of fairness, understanding, and the recognition of the love and care that Daniel had inspired in all of us. The day ended quietly, the home filled with the soft hum of daily life, a place of reflection, memory, and thoughtful action, where dignity and intelligence guided each step, and where the presence of trust, patience, and resilience slowly, inevitably, reasserted itself in the rhythm of our lives. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, casting soft patterns across the countertop, and I took a moment to inhale the familiar sense of brewed coffee and toasted bread, grounding myself before the day began. Emily moved through the space with her usual brisk efficiency, her eyes occasionally flicking toward me, searching for a reaction that I refused to give. I poured a cup of coffee for both of us and carried it to the small breakfast nook, setting it gently in front of her with a polite smile that held no hesitation or fear. As we sat, I spoke about Daniel in quiet tones, sharing a memory from his childhood, the way he would eagerly explore the backyard garden with curiosity and determination, examining every leaf and flower with wonder. My voice remained calm and even, allowing the story to serve as both remembrance and gentle reminder of the life we had shared, and the values he had carried. Emily responded with short, clipped comments, but I noticed the way she lingered on my words, listening more intently than she had previously, and I understood that my composure was beginning to shift the dynamic subtly in my favor. Throughout breakfast, I maintained the rhythm of the morning, attending to the small details that spoke to my presence and care, adjusting a napkin, offering a plate of scones, and moving with a steady, unhurried grace. By mid-morning, I decided to review some of Daniel's personal belongings, organizing photographs and letters with thoughtfulness, and in doing so, I discovered a note he had written about his hopes for the family, his desire for harmony, and his belief in the strength of kindness. Reading his words, I felt a renewed sense of purpose, a reminder that even in the face of tension, maintaining dignity and compassion was paramount. I began to think about the interactions I had observed with Emily, noticing patterns in her behavior, small inconsistencies, and moments where her confidence wavered, and I realized that careful observation combined with quiet action could yield more meaningful results than confrontation. As the afternoon approached, I prepared a light lunch, setting the table with care, and when Emily entered the kitchen, I greeted her warmly, offering assistance with preparation and listening attentively to her brief remarks. The subtle shift in energy between us was noticeable. She seemed more hesitant, perhaps recognizing that my steady presence was not something easily undermined. I spent the remainder of the day moving methodically through the house, tending to household tasks, ensuring spaces were orderly, and taking quiet moments to reflect by the window, watching the shifting light and the gentle sway of trees outside. Each action reinforced a sense of stability and calm, a reminder that despite challenges, the environment we cultivate can influence interactions and foster clarity. As evening settled in, I prepared tea and offered it with grace, engaging in measured conversation and allowing the quiet moments to speak volumes. I reflected on the importance of patience, strategic observation, and thoughtful action, understanding that my approach needed to balance firmness with warmth, authority with care, and resolve with empathy. The day ended with a sense of accomplishment, not through loud victories or dramatic gestures, but through the quiet affirmation of presence, the cultivation of dignity, and the mindful steps taken to honor both the memory of Daniel and the integrity of our home. The morning light filtered gently through the curtains, painting the living room in soft hues of gold and cream, and I found myself moving through the space with a deliberate calm, each action purposeful yet unhurried, a quiet testament to resilience and presence. Emily was already up, bustling through her routine, and I offered a polite greeting, holding my composure and allowing a serene demeanor to guide my words. I decided to spend the day organizing Daniel's study, carefully arranging books, letters, and photographs, creating a space that honored his memory and reflected the care he had always shown for our home. As I worked, I allowed myself to remember the laughter and small victories we had shared as a family, the lessons he had taught me about patience, curiosity, and the importance of kindness in every interaction. Emily occasionally entered the room, glancing at my work and offering brief comments, and I noticed a subtle shift in her approach, a slight hesitation that suggested she recognized the quiet authority I held simply by remaining steadfast and composed. I spoke softly about Daniel, sharing anecdotes and memories that highlighted his thoughtfulness and humor, and while Emily responded tersely at first, there were moments when her eyes lingered, absorbing the history and the love that filled the room. By mid-morning, I had created a small display of photographs and personal items, each carefully placed to tell a story of Daniel's life and the values he had cherished, and I felt a quiet satisfaction in the balance I had achieved between remembrance and order. As the day progressed, I moved between rooms, tending to household details with deliberate attention, ensuring the home reflected warmth, care, and continuity, and I noticed how my composed presence influenced the energy of the space, subtly reminding everyone that the legacy of kindness and respect I had nurtured could not be overshadowed. During lunch, I prepared a simple meal, setting the table with attention to detail, offering Emily a place alongside me, and engaging in conversation that was polite and steady, allowing moments of shared reflection without conflict. I focused on the subtleties of tone, body language, and presence, understanding that influence often comes quietly through consistent, thoughtful action rather than forceful assertion. Later in the afternoon, I spent time reviewing old letters and notes from Daniel, reading his words carefully and reflecting on the guidance he had provided throughout his life, and I felt a renewed sense of purpose, a reminder that honoring his memory required both respect and strategic patience in dealing with the dynamics of the household. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the floor, I prepared the evening meal, maintaining calm and focus, and when Emily entered to assist or observe, I met her presence with steady composure, reinforcing the balance of dignity and quiet authority that had begun to define our interactions. By the end of the day, I felt a deep sense of accomplishment, not through confrontation or dramatics, but through the careful cultivation of presence, mindfulness, and respect for both the memory of Daniel and the harmony of the household, understanding that steadfastness and thoughtful action create the foundation for integrity, trust, and eventual clarity in every aspect of life. The morning air was crisp and carried the faint scent of wet grass from the garden outside, and I moved through the house with a quiet awareness, each step measured and deliberate, reinforcing the presence and calm I had cultivated over the past days. Emily was already busy with her routine, tidying the living room and adjusting a few items on the shelves, and I offered a polite greeting, my tone steady and composed, allowing no hint of tension to disrupt the atmosphere. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the rich aroma filling the kitchen, and considered the tasks ahead, planning to spend the morning reviewing some of Daniel's personal files and letters, ensuring they were organized and preserved in a way that honored his memory and maintained order in the home. As I moved into his study, I noticed the way sunlight filtered through the blinds, creating lines of gold and shadow across the floor, and I took a deep breath, centering myself and allowing the calm of the space to guide my actions. Emily appeared in the doorway, pausing briefly, and I offered a nod of acknowledgement, maintaining eye contact with gentle firmness, and she responded with a small smile, hesitant yet polite, a subtle indication that my presence and composure were beginning to influence the household dynamic. I spent the next hour arranging documents, letters, and photographs, each item carefully considered, creating a display that told the story of Daniel's life, his achievements, and his values, and I noticed Emily occasionally glancing at the arrangement, her movements slightly more measured, as though recognizing the thought and care I had invested. During the late morning, I took a break by the window, watching the trees sway gently in the breeze and reflecting on the past weeks, the challenges of grief, and the lessons I had learned about patience, resilience, and the power of quiet, deliberate action. Emily joined me briefly, offering a comment about the weather, and I responded with warmth and attentiveness, creating a brief moment of shared connection that emphasized respect and mutual recognition without compromising my boundaries or dignity. As the afternoon approached, I decided to prepare a light lunch, setting the table with care, selecting plates and utensils thoughtfully, and arranging a small bouquet of flowers in the center, a gesture that added a sense of harmony and intentionality to the space. Emily assisted with minor tasks, and I guided the conversation gently, focusing on memories of Daniel, the values he had shared, and the small joys of everyday life that he had cherished, creating an atmosphere that encouraged reflection, appreciation, and subtle acknowledgement of my continued role and influence in the home. After lunch, I returned to the study to review more of Daniel's personal notes, discovering reflections on family, kindness, and personal growth that reminded me of the importance of integrity and thoughtful action, and I made notes to preserve these reflections for future reference, ensuring they would continue to inspire and guide those who remained in the family. Throughout the day, I moved with intention, attending to household details, observing interactions, and considering the subtle cues in Emily's behavior, noting moments of hesitation, slight shifts in tone, and small adjustments in her approach that indicated awareness of my presence and influence. I realized that consistent, calm action combined with gentle guidance and thoughtful observation was shaping the environment, reinforcing the balance of respect, care, and authority that I sought to maintain. As evening drew near, I prepared a simple meal, inviting Emily to join me, and we shared a quiet dinner, exchanging polite conversation, memories, and small reflections, each word measured yet sincere, reinforcing the sense of harmony and stability I had worked to cultivate. By the end of the day, the house settled into a peaceful quiet, the air carrying the faint scent of dinner and the lingering warmth of sunlight fading from the rooms, and I felt a profound sense of accomplishment, knowing that through patience, intelligence, and deliberate action, I had nurtured both order and dignity, honoring Daniel's memory while quietly asserting the stability, presence, and respect that were rightfully mine within the family home. The morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains, casting gentle, dancing light across the polished hardwood floors, and I moved through the house with calm intention, carrying a tray of freshly brewed coffee and a small plate of muffins for Emily and myself. She looked up from the stack of bills she was reviewing, a hint of surprise in her expression as I approached, and I offered a polite smile, setting the tray on the counter before inviting her to join me at the small kitchen table. We sat in quiet companionship for a few moments, the rhythm of the house slow and reflective, and I began to recount a story from Daniel's college days, the way he had meticulously planned a community service project and inspired his friends to contribute their time and effort, a story that highlighted not just his diligence but the values he held dear. Emily listened, her hands folded on the table, her usual briskness tempered by the warmth of the memory, and I could sense a subtle shift in the energy between us, a recognition that while she may have intended to assert authority, the past and the legacy of care remained firmly grounded. After breakfast, I moved through the rooms tidying small spaces, straightening cushions, folding blankets, and arranging a few personal items that had sentimental value, each action deliberate, measured, and visible, quietly asserting my ongoing presence and investment in the home. Emily occasionally offered a comment, and I responded with calm attentiveness, acknowledging her input while maintaining the steadiness of my routine, and I noticed that she began to tread more carefully, her movements and speech reflecting a growing awareness of the respect and care I consistently embodied. By late morning, I decided to review more of Daniel's personal files and letters, reading through reflections he had written about family, community, and the importance of living with integrity. Each word reminded me of the principles he had lived by and reinforced my commitment to act with patience, intelligence, and thoughtful observation. I began to make careful notes, organizing documents in a way that preserved their meaning and emotional weight, creating a framework that could be referenced and appreciated, not only by myself but by others who valued his memory. As the afternoon approached, I prepared a light lunch, arranging the table with attention to detail, the placement of plates, cutlery, and a small centerpiece of fresh flowers reflecting the care and intention I brought to even the simplest tasks. Emily assisted in minor ways, and I guided the conversation gently, sharing small memories and encouraging reflection, fostering a quiet, respectful exchange that allowed the household to remain harmonious, while subtly reinforcing the boundaries I had established. After lunch, I walked through the garden, observing the early signs of spring, the buds on trees and the delicate blooms of flowers, taking time to breathe deeply and reflect on the past weeks, the dynamics of the household, and the strategic patience required to maintain composure, presence, and dignity. Returning indoors, I spent time in the living room arranging photographs and memorabilia, each item chosen to honor Daniel's life and create a visual narrative of care, love, and commitment, subtly reminding Emily that memory and respect are enduring forces that cannot be easily dismissed. As evening approached, I prepared dinner, inviting Emily to share in the task and conversation, maintaining calm and warmth, and I noticed that her demeanor had softened further, her gestures more measured and attentive, as if recognizing the quiet authority and integrity that I embodied. The shared meal passed with gentle conversation, interspersed with moments of reflection and memory, reinforcing connection and the importance of thoughtful engagement. By the end of the day, the house settled into a serene quiet, the soft hum of routine filling the space, and I felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that through patience, observation, and deliberate action, I had preserved dignity, reinforced presence, and honored the values Daniel had held dear, creating an environment of respect, stability, and mindful care that would guide the household in the days to come. The following morning, sunlight spilled into the kitchen, illuminating the countertops and casting long, soft shadows across the floor. And I moved through the house with a quiet sense of purpose, carrying a tray with freshly brewed tea and a small plate of fruit for both Emily and myself. She was already tidying the living room, her movements precise, and I offered a polite greeting, maintaining steady eye contact and a gentle smile that conveyed warmth without yielding authority. I placed the tray on the table and invited her to join me, and we sat together in a calm silence for a few moments before I began sharing a memory of Daniel, describing how he had devoted time to volunteer work in our community, bringing together friends and neighbors with patience, kindness, and thoughtful organization. Emily listened, her hands resting on the table, and although her words were sparse, I noticed subtle changes in her posture and expression, indicating that she recognized the sincerity and depth of the story I was sharing. After finishing our tea, I moved through the house, checking small details, tidying rooms, adjusting photographs, and arranging items with intentionality, each gesture reinforcing my ongoing presence and the care I had invested in our home. Emily appeared from time to time, making small comments or suggesting minor changes, and I responded calmly, incorporating her input when appropriate, but never allowing it to disrupt the structure and rhythm I had established. By mid-morning, I had returned to Daniel's study, reviewing personal letters and notes, reflecting on the values he had held and the guidance he had offered to all of us, and I took careful notes to ensure that his insights and principles were preserved and could continue to influence the household. I found comfort in the familiarity of his handwriting, the consistency of his voice throughout the letters, and the clarity of his vision for family and community, all of which reinforced my resolve to maintain dignity, patience, and thoughtful observation in the face of challenges. In the early afternoon, I prepared a light lunch, arranging the table with care, adding a small floral centerpiece, and inviting Emily to share in the task and the meal. Our conversation was gentle and measured, centered on memories of Daniel and reflections on values that mattered most to him, and I observed how her demeanor continued to soften, her movements more deliberate, and her tone more careful, suggesting an increasing awareness of my quiet influence. After lunch, I spent time in the living room arranging photographs and mementos, each carefully positioned to honor Daniel's memory and the history of our family, and I noticed how the atmosphere of the house had shifted subtly, the energy calmer, more reflective and respectful. I walked through the garden in the late afternoon, feeling the sun warm my skin and noticing the small changes of the season, the budding flowers and the fresh green shoots, all reminding me of continuity, renewal, and the steady rhythm of life despite grief and challenge. Returning indoors, I prepared the evening meal with precision, inviting Emily to assist, and we moved through the kitchen together with careful attention, engaging in light conversation, polite exchanges, and shared effort that reinforced connection and mutual recognition. As night fell, the house quieted, the fading light casting long shadows, and I reflected on the day, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment in the calm, deliberate actions that had maintained dignity, reinforced presence, and honored the memory of Daniel. Each interaction, each thoughtful gesture, and each moment of composure had contributed to an environment of respect, stability, and mindfulness, demonstrating that steady patience and quiet intelligence can shape outcomes and preserve integrity within the family home. The morning was calm, the sun spilling soft, golden light across the kitchen floor, and I moved through the house with deliberate ease, carrying a tray of freshly brewed coffee and a small assortment of pastries for Emily and myself. She looked up from a stack of letters, her expression caught between curiosity and politeness, and I offered a gentle smile, placing the tray carefully on the table before inviting her to join me. We sat together in quiet companionship for a moment, the rhythm of the house slow and reflective, and I shared a story about Daniel, describing how he had devoted countless hours to mentoring a young neighbor, encouraging growth, learning, and the pursuit of meaningful goals, a story that highlighted his kindness and thoughtful approach to life. Emily listened attentively, her hands folded on the table, her usual briskness softened by the warmth of the memory, and I sensed a subtle recognition that my calm presence and focus on meaningful reflection held weight within the household. After breakfast, I moved through the rooms, attending to small details, adjusting photographs, folding blankets, and arranging cherished mementos, each action intentional and visible, quietly reaffirming my role and care for the home. Emily offered brief comments or suggestions from time to time, and I responded with steady attentiveness, integrating her remarks without allowing them to disrupt the balance and rhythm I had established. By mid-morning, I returned to Daniel's study to review personal letters and notes, reflecting on his values and the guidance he had offered, and I made careful notes to ensure his insights and principles were preserved, ready to be referenced and appreciated by the family. Each letter reminded me of his thoughtful approach to life and reinforced the importance of patience, integrity, and deliberate action in navigating the household dynamics. In the early afternoon, I prepared a light lunch, setting the table with intention, arranging utensils and plates with care, and placing a small floral centerpiece that added warmth and harmony to the space. Emily assisted in minor ways, and I guided the conversation gently, sharing memories of Daniel and reflecting on lessons he had taught, allowing for a calm, respectful exchange that strengthened the connection and subtly reinforced the boundaries I had established. After lunch, I spent time in the living room arranging photographs, personal items, and other mementos, each chosen to honor Daniel's life and the history of our family, creating a quiet narrative of care, respect, and memory that influenced the energy of the space. I walked briefly through the garden, enjoying the fresh air and observing the early signs of spring, the budding flowers, and the gentle movement of leaves in the breeze, all reminders of continuity and renewal despite the challenges of grief and household dynamics. Returning indoors, I prepared the evening meal with careful attention, inviting Emily to assist, and we moved together with measured steps and polite conversation, reinforcing connection, shared responsibility, and mutual recognition. As the day drew to a close, the house settled into a serene quiet, the soft hum of daily life filling the space, and I reflected on the accomplishments of the day, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction in the calm, intentional actions that had preserved dignity, maintained presence, and honored the memory of Daniel, ensuring that integrity, thoughtful observation, and respectful interaction continued to guide the household and reinforce the values he had cherished.